Chapter 8. When Elwood got out, he returned to the yard crew. Jamie the Mexican had been chucked to the white side again, so another boy was in charge. More than once, Elwood caught himself swinging the stick with too much violence, like he was attacking the grass with a leather strap. He stopped and told his heart to slow down. 10 days later, Jamie was back with the colored boys. Spencer rooted him out, but he didn't mind. "That's my life, Ping Pong." Elwood's schooling was not going to improve. He had to accept that. He touched Mr. Goodall's arm outside the schoolhouse. The teacher didn't recognize him. Goodall repeated his promise to find more challenging work, but Elwood was onto the teacher now and didn't ask again. One late November afternoon, they sent Elwood with a team to clean out the basement of the schoolhouse, and he found a set of Chipwick's British classics underneath some boxes containing calendars for 1954. Trollope and Dickens and people with names like that. Elwood went through the books one by one during school hours while the boys around him stuttered and stumbled. And he had intended to study British literature at the college. Now he had to teach himself. It would have to do. Punishment for acting above your station was a central principle in Harriet's interpretation of the world. In the hospital, Elwood wondered if the viciousness of his beating owed something to his request for harder classes. Get that, uppity nigger. Now he worked on a new theory. There was no higher system guiding Nichols' brutality, merely an indiscriminate spite, one that had nothing to do with people. A figment from 10th grade science struck him. A perpetual misery machine, one that operated by itself without human agency. Also, Archimedes, one of his encyclopedia finds. Violence is the only lever big enough to move the world. He canvassed, but didn't get a clear picture of how to graduate early. Desmond the scientist of demerit, and credit was no help. You get merits for behavior every week, if you do what you're supposed to do, right off the bat. But if your house father mixes you up with somebody else, or he's out to get you, zip. For demerits, you never know. The demerit scale varied from dormitory to dormitory, smoking, fighting, perpetuating a state of dishevelment. The penalty depended on where they sent you and the whims of the local houseman. Blasphemy cost 100 demerits in Cleveland. Blakely was a God-fearing sort, but only 50 in Roosevelt. Jacking off was a flat 200 demerits in Lincoln, but if you were caught jacking someone else, it was only 100. Only 100. "That's Lincoln for you," Demont said, as if explaining a foreign land, gems and ducats. Blakely like his hooch, Elwood noticed. The man was half-mast until noon. Did that mean he couldn't rely on the house father's accounts? Say he stayed out of trouble, Elwood asked. Did everything right? How fast could he climb from the lowest level of grub to the highest level of ace? If everything went perfect. It's too late for perfect if you already went down, Desmond told him. Problem was, even if you avoid trouble, trouble might reach out and snatch you anyway. Another student might sniff out a weakness and start something. One of the staff dislikes your smile and knocks it off your face. You might stumble to a bramble of bad luck of the sort that got you here in the first place. Elwood decided by June he climbed the merit ladder out of this pit, 4 months short of what that judge gave him. It was comforting. He was accustomed to measuring time according to the school calendar, so a June graduation made his nickel term into a lost year. This next fall, he'd be back at Lincoln High School for the senior year, with Mr. Hill's endorsement, enrolled at Melvin Griggs again. They spent his college money on the lawyer, but if Elwood worked extra hard next summer, he'd to make it back. He had a date. Now he needed a course of action. He felt rotten those first days out of the hospital until he came up with a scheme that combined Turner's advice with what he learned from his heroes in the movement. Watch and think and plan. Let the world be a mob. Elwood would walk through it. They might curse and spit and strike him, but he'd make it through to the other side. Bloodied and tired, but he'd make it through. He waited, but no payback came from Lonnie and Black Mike, except for an incident where Griff hip-checked Elwood and sent him crashing down the stairs. They ignored him. Corey, the boy he stepped up to defend, winked at him once. Everyone had moved on and girding themselves for the next nickel misship, the one that was out of their hands. One Wednesday after breakfast, Carter the houseman ordered Elwood over to the warehouse for a new detail. Turner was there, along with a young white man, a lanky sort with beat-neck slouch and a greasy spray of blonde hair. Elwood had seen him around, smoking in the shade of various buildings. His name was Harper, and according to staff records, he worked in community service. Harper looked Elwood over and said, "He'll do." The supervisor closed a big sliding door to the warehouse, bolted it, and they climbed into the front seat of a gray van. Unlike the other school vehicles, it didn't have Nichols' name painted on it. Elwood sat in the middle. "Here we go," Turner said. He rolled down the window. "Herbert asked who I thought should replace Smitty, and I said you. I told him you weren't another one of those dummies they got around here." Smitty was an older boy from Roosevelt Dormitory next door. He hit the highest rank of ace, and graduated the week prior. Although Elwood thought graduate was a moronic word to use, the boy couldn't read a lick, plain as day. Harper said, "He said you can keep your mouth shut, which is a requirement." With that, they were off the grounds. Since the hospital, Elwood and Turner hung out most days, killed afternoons in the Cleveland rec room playing checkers and ping pong with Desmond and some of the other even-tempered boys. Turner usually stumbled into a room as if searching for something, then started bullshitting and forgot whatever errand he had brought him there. He was better at chess than Elwood, told better jokes than Desmond, and unlike Jamie, ran on a more consistent schedule. Elwood knew Turner was assigned to community service, but he got cagey when Elwood pressed further. It's taking things and making sure they end up where they're supposed to be in the end. "What the fuck does that mean?" Jamie said. The boy was not a natural cusser, and his occasional stutter diminished the effect. But of the available vices at Nickel, he had adopted foul language as one of the tamer choices. "It means community service," Elwood said. The immediate meaning of community service was it allowed Elwood to pretend he had never hitchhiked to college for a few hours. He was out of Nickel. His first trip out in the free world since his arrival. Free world was prison slang, but it had migrated to the reformatory school because it made sense, transmitted through a boy who heard it from hard luck father or uncle, or from a staff member, revealing how he really felt about his charges, despite the school vocabulary Nickel liked to use for it. The air was cool in Elwood's lungs, and everything outside the window dazzled, renewed. This or this, his eye doctor asked at checkups, a choice between two lenses or different power. Elwood never ceased to marvel how you could walk around and get used to seeing only a fraction of the world, not knowing you only saw a sliver of the real thing. This or this, definitely this. All the van tumbled past, the sudden majesty of everything, even the falling down shotgun shacks and sad concrete black block houses, the junker cars half in the weeds in someone's yard. He saw a rusty sign for Wild Cherry High C and was more thirsty than he'd ever been in his life. Harper noticed a shift in Elwood's posture. "He likes being out," the supervisor said, and he and Turner laughed. He turned on the radio. Elvis was singing. Harper slapped the steering wheel in time. In temperament, Harper was an unlikely Nickel employee. All right for a white man, in Turner's estimation. He practically grew up on the grounds, raised by his mother's sisters, a secretary in the administration building. He spent untold afternoons on the grounds as a mascot to white students, and picked up odd work when he was old enough. Painted reindeer in the annual Christmas display ever since he could hold a brush. Now he was 20 years old and worked full-time. "My aunt said I'm a get-along type," he told the boys one shift while they idled outside the 5 and 10. "I suppose I am. I grew up around you boys, white in college, and I know you're just like me, but you had some bad luck." They made 4 stops around the town of Eleanor before the fire chief's house. First was John Diner. A rusty outline attested to a fallen-off letter and apostrophe. They parked down the alley, and Elwood got a look at the van's cargo, cartons and crates of Nichols kitchen stores, cans of peas, industrial tins of peaches, applesauce, baked beans, gravy. A selection of this week's shipment from the state of Florida. Harper lit a cigarette and put his ear to a transistor radio. Game on today. Turner handed boxes of green beans and a sack of onions down to Elwood before they brought them into the back entrance of the restaurant kitchen. "Don't forget the molasses," Harper said. When they finished, the owner emerged, a porky redneck whose apron was a dark stains, and clapped Harper on the back. He handed Harper an envelope and asked about his family. "You know Aunt Lucille," Harper said, "supposed to stay off her feet and never stays put for anything." The next two stops were also restaurants, a barbecue stand and a meat and three joint over the county line. And then they unloaded a store of canned vegetable at the Top Shop grocery. Harper folded each envelope of cash in half, stabbed a rubber band around it, and tossed it into the glove compartment before the next destination. Turner let the work speak for itself. Harper wanted to be certain about Elwood's comfort with his new detail. "You don't look surprised," the young white man said. "It ended up here somewhere," Elwood responded. "How things are done. Spencer tells me where to go, and he kicks it up to Director Hardy." Harper fiddled the dial. After more rock and roll, Elvis popped up again. "He was everywhere. It used to be worse in the old days," Harper said. "From what my aunt said, the state cracked down, and now we lay off the South Campus stuff, meaning they only sold the black students supplies. We had this good old boy who used to run Nickel, Roberts, who would have sold the air you breathe if he could have. Now that was a crook. Beats cleaning the toilets," Turner said. "Beats cutting grass, if you ask me." It was nice to be out, Elwood said so. In the coming months, Elwood saw all of Eleanor, Florida, as a three-man crew made the rounds. He got to know the back of the short Main Street, and Harper parked by the service entrances. Sometimes they unloaded notebooks and pencils, sometimes medicine and bandages, but mostly it was food. Thanksgiving turkeys and Christmas hams disappeared into the hands of fried cooks, and the assistant principal of the elementary school opened a pack of erasers, counted them one by one. Elwood wondered why the boys had no toothpaste. Now he knew. They parked behind the 5 and 10, Fisher's Drugs, and phoned ahead to the local doctor who slithered up the driver's window with a furtive air. Once in a while they stopped at a green three-story house on a dead-end street, and Harper got paid by a well-groomed city council type in a sweater vest. Harper didn't know the guy's story, he said, but the man had good manners, crisp bills, and liked to talk Florida teams. This or this. Every time he left school property, the new lens popped into place, and all it permitted him to see. The first day, when the back of the van was empty, Elwood assumed they returned Nickel, but they headed to a clean, quiet street that reminded him of the nicer parts of Tallahassee, the white part. They pulled up to a big white house that floated on a sea of undulating green. An American flag side a pole attaching to the roof. They got out, and another look in the recesses of the van revealed a canvas tarp hiding paint supplies. "Mrs. Davis," Harper said, bowing his head. A white lady with a beehive hairdo waved from the front porch. "This is so exciting," she said. Elwood didn't make eye contact as she led them around the back of the yard, where a gray, tired-looking gazebo perched at the edge of the oak trees. "That it?" Harper asked. "My grandfather built it 40 years ago," Mrs. Davis said. "Conrad proposed to me right there." She wore a yellow dress with a houndstooth pattern and dark sunglasses like Jackie Kennedy. She spotted a thin green bug on her shoulder, flipped it off, and smiled. A new paint job was in order. Mrs. Davis gave Harper a broom. Harper gave Elwood the broom, and Elwood swept the decking, while Turner got the paint from the van. "You boys are so nice to help us out here," Mrs. Davis told them before she returned to the house. "I'll be back around 3, Harper said. Then he was gone too. Turner explained that Harper had a girlfriend on Maple. Her man worked at one of the factories and kept long hours. "We're going to paint," Elwood said. "Yeah, man." "He's leaving us here?" "Yeah, man. Mr. Davis is the fire chief. He had us out here doing little stuff. Smitty and I did all the rooms on the top floors." He pointed to the dormer windows, as if it were possible for Elwood to appreciate his handiwork. "All those guys on the school board, they have us do chores. Sometimes it's some bullshit, but I'll take being out here over any job back at school." As did Elwood. It was humid November afternoon, and he savored the free world sound of bugs and birds. Their mating calls and warnings were soon accompanied by Turner's whistling Chuck Berry, if Elwood had not mistaken. The brand of paint was Dixie, the color Dixie white. The last time Elwood had done any painting, he'd given Mrs. Lamont's outhouse a new coat, a chore for which his grandmother had loaned him out for 10 cents. Turner laughed and told Elwood how in the olden days the school sent teams of boys into Eleanor all the time to do work for the big shots. According to Harper, sometimes it was favors like this paint job, but a lot of time it was for real money, which schools kept for their upkeep, same as the money from the crops and the printing jobs and the bricks. Further back, it was more gruesome. When you graduated, you didn't go back to your family. You had a parole round where they basically sold your monkey's ass to people in town. Work like a slave and live in their basement or whatever. Beat you, kick you, feed you shit food like we get now? Hell no. Way worse. You had to work off your debt, he said. Then they let you go. Debt from what? That stumped him. I never thought about it that way. He stayed Elwood's arm. You don't want to go too fast, he said. This can be a 3-day job. We play it right. Mrs. Davis brings out lemonade. When 2 glasses of lemonade appeared on a bronze tray, it was excellent. They finished the railings and lattice of the walls. Elwood shook a new can of Dixie White, pried it open, and stirred. He told Turner how he got pinched and sent to nickel. Man, that's a raw deal. But Turner never talked about his old life. This was his second term at the school after being out almost a year. Maybe asking about how he got snatched back was a way in. The nickel undertow sucked up everything, and his friend's past might get pulled into the story. Turner sat down at Elwood's question. You know what a pin setter is? In a bowling alley? Elwood said. I was working as a pin setter in a bowling alley down in Tampa the holiday. Most places they got the machine that does that, but Mr. Garfield was hanging in there. He liked to see his pin boys crouch at the end of the lane like we were sprinters, or dogs about to go out hunting. It wasn't a bad job, picking up the pins after each throw and setting them up for the next frame. Mr. Garfield was a friend of the Everetts, where I was living. The state paid the Everetts money to take in kids. Some money, not a lot. There were always a lot of us strays around, coming and going. Like I said, it was a good job. Thursday was color night, and everybody from all around the different colored bowling leagues, and that was a good time, but mostly it was these stupid rednecks from Tampa. Some bad, some less bad, white people. I was pretty fascinated and find it easy to smile while I'm working, being somewhere else in my thoughts while I'm doing whatever, and the customers liked me. They gave me tips. I got to know each of the regulars, not like know them, but we saw each other every week like that. I started goofing off with them. If it was a guy I knew, I'd make a joke when they fouled, or make some clown face like this when they threw a gutter or had some funny looking split. That became my routine, joking around with the regulars, and I liked the tips. There's this old head who worked in the kitchen. His name was Lowe. One of those dudes you know who have seen some shit. He didn't talk much to us pin boys. He flipped burgers. Because he wasn't too friendly, we didn't conversate much. This one night I was on my break, and I go out for a cigarette behind the grill, and he was there, in his apron covered with grease. It was a hot night, and he looks me up and says to me, I see you out there, nigger, putting on a show. Why you always sucking and driving for these white people? Ain't nobody ever teach you self-respect? 2 other setters out there, and they hear this. They're like, damn. My face get all hot. I was ready to punch this old fool. He doesn't know me. Don't know shit about me. I look at him, and he ain't moving, standing there smoking this cigarette he rolled. And he knows I'm not going to do anything, because he's right in what he said. Next time I was on a shift, I don't know, I started doing it differently. Instead of joking with them, I was mean. When they hit the gutter or stepped over a line, there was nothing friendly in my face. I saw it in their eyes when they realized the game had changed. Maybe we pretended to be on the same side before and it was all equal, but now it wasn't. At the end of the night, I've been taunting this fucking Pegger Wood the whole game, this big hee-haw me head. It's his turn, and he was to pick up a 4-6 split. I said, ain't that a stinker? Like Bugs Bunny, and that's it for him. He comes charging up the lane. He's chasing me around the place. I'm jumping from lane to lane up in everybody's business, dodging balls, and then finally his friends hold him back. They come here all the time, and they're trying not to make things hard for Mr. Garfield. They know me, or thought they knew me until I started not acting right, and they get their friend and cool him out and leave." Turner grinned as he acted out the story. Until the last part, he squinted at the floor of the gazebo, as if trying to make out something tiny. "That was the end of it, really," he said, scratching the nick in his ear. "Next week I saw that guy's car in the parking lot, and I threw a cinder block through the window, and the cops picked me up." Harper was an hour late. They weren't going to complain. Free time nickel on one side, work time in the free world on the other. It was an easy calculation. "Going to need a ladder," Elwood told Harper when he showed up. "Sure," Harper said. Mrs. Davis waved from the porch as they pulled away. "How's your lady, Harper?" Turner asked. Harper tucked in his shirt tail. Just when you ease into a good time, they bring up whole other thing they've been thinking about since the last time you saw them. "Sure thing," Turner said. He reached for Harper's cigarette and lit one. Elwood grabbed everything he saw in the free world to reassemble it in his mind later. What things look like, and what things smell like, and other things as well. 2 days later, Harper told him he was on community service permanently. But then, white men had always noticed his industrious nature. The news brightened his mood. Each time they returned a nickel, he wrote down the particulars in a composition book, the date, the name of individual, and the establishment. Some names took a while to fill in, but Elwood had always been the patient type and thorough.